Welcome to the Empowering Transformation Series, How to Release Stress and Past Trauma, Have a Peaceful Mind, and Have the Power to Move Forward. Hi, I'm Lori K. Coleman, your host, and I am doing this because I really care about getting tools into people's hands to be able to handle the times that we are in. Today, I'm so thrilled to have Allie Duzzett. She is a master intuitive healer, and she teaches her intuitive healing and deep past resolution and how to heal from pre-earth traumas. Allie, thank you so much for your time with us today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
Yay! Well, I hear that you do something called scribbling and that you have actually scribbled yourself into a new house. Tell us about that.
Yes, I know. It sounds weird when you just say it, but it is a true story. Yeah. So, so one of my favorite tools that I use is called scribbling, and it's literally scribbling. I'll give you a demonstration in a bit, but it takes negative energy and it gets it out through motion onto a piece of paper that you can throw away. And last year, about 18 months ago, I decided I was sick to death of my tiny little house. We were living in an 880 square foot house with 4 children, 2 bedrooms. And I was ready to die. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just need a new house. I just need one. But, my husband was not on board with moving. Like, he wanted to move, but actually calling a realtor, that's just so much work, and so we were just not in a space where we were ready to take that step. I was ready, but not all members of my partnership were ready. And so, so I thought scribbling is such an effective way to clear blocks. And you don't even have to know what they are. I thought there's so many blocks to me moving out of this disgusting house. And I don't even know what they are, but I wonder if I scribbled about them every day, what would happen? And so I started scribbling on a Sunday, and I just set my intention, like I'm scribbling out my blocks to getting a new house. And I scribbled until I was done. It takes about 5 minutes. And then I did it again the next day. And I kind of had a talk with my husband, like, what if we really did move? And he said, well, I guess it wouldn't hurt to just call up the bank and see if we could, what it would entail. And so on day 3 of scribbling every day, he called up the bank, and we went into the bank and realized that we could actually afford way more house than we thought. And day 4, we called up a realtor. And so remember, that's Thursday. He said, how about on Saturday, we spend the day looking at houses? So we said, okay, scribbled in the morning. We looked at, I think, like 12 houses that day. We just went, and went to see every house available, in this huge radius. And by the end of the day, we said, oh, we love this house. And 5 days later, we were under contract. And so we went from not even having any plans to move to being under contract for a brand new house in 10 days, which was astonishing. If you knew my situation, I'll just say my husband's a Taurus, he's just very stubborn and he doesn't like change at all. And so to go from nothing to a new house in 10 days was absolutely astonishing.
Wow. So now scribbling typically is just for yourself, but it helped change things so that your husband was no longer dragging his feet, or how does that quite work?
Well, I think for this situation, I scribbled on the energies, whatever energies were keeping me away from my new house, whatever that was, that originated from him, if it originated from me, if it originated from this vast universe that for some reason wanted me in this tiny house, whatever it was, I just said, I don't even know what the problem is. My unknown problem, I'm getting rid of it now by transmuting it into motion and throwing it in the trash.
So yeah, this transmuting it into something. But let's first talk about emotions being energy before we get into the transmutation part. So tell us about emotions and energy.
Yeah. Emotions, I love them because they are so multifaceted, right? So I think it's a pretty common knowledge, although we don't think about it in our society. Like, people take chemical antidepressants because on some level they are understanding that scientifically our emotions are chemical. So what does that mean? What's the implication, right? If our emotions are chemical, if the chemical structures of what's going on in our brain, are chemical, it means that they actually have a molecular structure, right? Like, our emotions are chemicals, right? They have structure, they have atoms, okay? And they are energy as well. There is no such thing as immaterial matter. And every feeling that you have is like a real and legitimate object inside your own body. It's in your space. And what we know from physics is that when you, like, all objects are moving all the time, right? And so including the chemicals of our emotion within our own body. And so what we need to do, if we have an overload of emotions, right? We have depression, we have anxiety, we have all this stress. What it actually means on a biological, physiological level is that we have chemical structures, an excess of chemicals floating around in our body doing whatever they're doing. But it is a biological thing, it is a chemical thing. All of those structures are vibrating, right? Because everything is vibrating, atoms are moving all the time, every atom is moving. And what we need to do is basically literally metabolize these emotions, right? We need to actually break apart the molecular structures and basically, like, flush them out of our bodies through our elimination pathways. I mean, like, bathroom stuff, crying. This is like why crying is so good. And why for my own clients, I always say, drink so much water before the session, because we're going to use that water to flush out all of the molecular bonds that we have just broken of all the chemicals of your emotions. They need to flush out. And so you can think of it kind of like fat, right? So we know that we burn fat, right? We take the structure of fat, a fat molecule, and we literally transmute it into heat and carbon dioxide. And so when you burn fat, what it actually becomes is heat. When you get so hot from working out and you're sweating, and it becomes carbon dioxide, your exhalations. You literally breathe out your fat, right? When you're burning fat, it's your deep breaths when you're exercising. That's what's burning your fat. Or that's what your fat is becoming. It's becoming your carbon dioxide. And that is a basic transmutation of a fat molecule. Fat molecules become heat, carbon dioxide. Then maybe some water, And so emotions are basically the same way. We metabolize our fat and we have to metabolize our emotions. When we take a deep breath, our lungs create neuropeptides, which actually break apart these molecular bonds as well. So that's one reason why when you are taking a deep breath as part of your just mood stabilization, like take your deep breath and count to 10 before you get mad, all of that kind of thing. It's literally changing what's going on inside your body on a molecular level. And so that is kind of what gave me the idea for scribbling. I thought, transmutation of fat, like, you can burn fat, and fat is like, it's like a chemical, or like a, it's got a structure in your body. And I thought, I wonder if you could burn emotions as well. What if you could burn them through actual motion? And some people say the word emotion really just means energy in motion, right? Mm-hmm. And so I decided to just experiment with it one day with a client who, it was a terrible situation. She had her family living with her father-in-law, and he was just a very toxic soul. And he was just very creepy, and she just always, like, got these icky feelings when he was around, and he'd always kind of lurk and, like, stand right behind people, and she hated it, but they were living there in his house, so what could they do? And so I thought, I'm going to see if scribbling will help this situation. So what I did was I took my pen, took my piece of paper, and I wrote at the top of the paper, her father-in-law is creepy and won't leave her alone. Okay, so I just, like, wrote that sentence on the top of the paper, and I imagined the energy of that creepiness. So not his energy, not his personal energy, but, like, the general feeling of his creepiness, and I imagined it coming into my arm and into my pen. And then I just scribbled. And that one probably took, I don't know, 15 minutes or something, which is pretty long for scribbling. And, but eventually it got to the point where it made this shape, and I'll see if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Hole. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, okay, this empty hole must mean that it's done. Like, it just felt so done. I felt like a huge shift. And so I, emailed my client. I said, well, I just tried an experiment, tried to scribble out his creepy lurking. And so you'll have to see if you notice a difference. And she wrote back the next day and said, I cannot believe it. He spent the whole day by himself doing his own thing instead of, standing creepily next to everyone in my family. We hardly even saw him. It was a miracle. And so that was the first thing that made me realize, like, oh, like, I should really be figuring out how this can work. And that was probably about 7 months before I tried scribbling for my new house. But that was, to me, a really great evidence of how you can take the energy of a situation and just get it out in motion, right? Like, it's all of this tension, it's all of this stress, it's these negative vibrations, and we just take them and get them out of the ether, get them out of our bodies, get them out of wherever they are, put them on a piece of paper. I will say, when I scribble on dark stuff like that creepy lurking, or even my house issues, it was so deep in my heart, all of the issues surrounding getting a new house. When I finished scribbling that, it felt so disgusting. Like, the paper itself had the most nastiest vibe to it. And I just kind of like plucked it out. And well, at the time, we lived in this super tiny townhouse, so I had to like run 2 streets over to throw it away in the dumpster. But I was like, this cannot even go in a trash can in my house. Like, it has to go far away. So sometimes these things are so toxic. You can really feel it when you're done scribbling it out. The paper itself feels gross, and you realize, oh my gosh, that grossness was in my own heart, or that grossness was like in that weird situation with that weird father-in-law, and now it's gone. Like, now it's in this paper, and now it's in the trash, and it's not in my life anymore.
Allie, this reminds me, I was part of your group when you were experimenting with this, and you're like, tell me your stories, I'm creating the book. And yeah, I would scribble on different topics and just put a sentence on the top about what I'm focusing on to have released from my body. And sometimes I wanted to go burn the paper. And I have a little space in the backyard that we can safely do that. So, and that made it even more fun.
Yeah.
And I've heard about writing and burning, and I had done that before, but this time I scribbled. I didn't even have to come up with the sentences. And it's really fascinating to just how it feels. I don't know, as you're scribbling, it's just, so something is releasing.
Yeah.
It's quite fascinating.
Yeah. I love it because you don't have to think of those sentences, right? Like, you don't even have to know what it is. And that's one thing that I love for my clients that are sitting there and they say, I just feel so blocked. I don't know what my real problem is. And I say, okay, on your piece of paper, you write, I don't know what my problem is. And now it's scribbled it out, and then when they're done, you're like, oh, now I know what my problem is. I'm like, okay, now write your problem on the top of the paper, And you can just say, I don't know what's wrong, and write it down and scribble it out, and it will still come out. You don't need to know.
With things that are a little bit heavier, like trauma, the energy of trauma, let's talk about this motion breaking down and removing that kind of thing.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so this is a really important topic because it is such a simple thing to do. But if you're dealing with an enormous trauma, it's really important not to try and scribble it all out at once. And so one example that I'll give is a client who was a victim of severe and extreme child abuse. And she thought, oh, I'll just scribble out my trauma from my severe and extreme child abuse. And I say severe and extreme, and I mean, like, most people are not even capable of imagining what horrors she has been through. Mm-hmm. So obviously, 3 hours later, she's still scribbling and no end in sight. Like, no. So when you have a big trauma, even like my house trauma, I thought this house issue is too big for 5 minutes. So what you do when you have a gigantic trauma or even a medium-sized one and you just don't have 20 minutes, but you might have 2 minutes to deal with it, is you go into your mind, okay? You're gonna close your eyes and imagine this issue, the trauma of it. And so you might imagine it as like a big, dark, yucky ball, or you might imagine it as whatever you want. It doesn't matter, but you can scoop it all into one thing. And I just imagine like Thor's hammer, you know, Marvel style, and I smash the ball of this negative energy into just tons of tiny pieces. Okay, so we're taking this enormous energy and just smushing it down, smashing it apart into tiny pieces. And this is a really good exercise for anything that you're going through, because you will see for yourself as you just imagine that, how big problems become, they feel more manageable when you do that. Even if that's all that you do, it just feels more manageable, because instead of dealing with this huge problem, you realize, no, it's not a huge problem. It's this tiny problem, this tiny problem, this tiny problem, this tiny problem. And they're all different tiny problems. And maybe I can't deal with all of them at once, but I could deal with one. And I could maybe deal with another one tomorrow. And so it makes it a lot more manageable. But when we smash that imagination of that trauma into lots of tiny pieces, then what we can do is set the intention. Okay, we're gonna choose in our minds, like right now I'm going to scribble out as many tiny pieces as can fit into 5 minutes. And so you can set a time boundary on it, or you can say, I'm just going to scribble out one tiny piece of my trauma today, however long that can take. If you do muscle test, you can muscle test on how long it will take to clear out whatever kind of a trauma. Mm-hmm. So for my house, I think I had tested that it would take like 2.5 hours of scribbling to manifest a new house, to just clear my blocks to manifesting a new house. Because I really feel like most people, like if you're trying to be a good person and, you know, you haven't done these terrible things, when you do bad stuff, you try and fix it. You know, if you have this generally good heart, the universe wants to reward you. Like it wants you to have this great life, you know, I really believe that. And so then what's the real problem? The real problem is self-sabotage. It's what's going on inside of you, you know? And so it's your own blocks. It's your own issues that you don't even know what you have going on. And so anyway, this 2.5 hours of scribbling, I thought, oh God, that's so much scribbling. You'll see for yourself, it tires out your hand, you know, a lot longer than 10 minutes. That's like pretty long for your poor hand. And so, so I just said, okay, I'll chop it up and do 5 minutes a day and see how long it takes to like get things going. And it didn't take very long to get things going. I will say that my favorite thing to do with scribbling is put on TV, and I put on just like a lighthearted show. And I do my scribbling while I watch a show, because it's really easy to just have your pen in your hand and have your paper and just scribble, scribble, scribble. And you don't even have to look at it. You're just letting your hand do its own thing. And so you can just decide what you want to clear and then just go watch The Office. You know, just go watch, you know, whatever show that you watch.
Interesting. You know, one of the things that you said that I would like to explore a little bit. Why does imagining work? When you say, just imagine this, just imagine that, why does imagining even do anything?
That's such a good question. No one's asked me that before, but I love that question. I really believe that imagination is just so much more powerful than people think. You know, another word for imagination is visualization. And a lot of people understand the concepts of visualization, maybe, but they don't realize it's the same thing as imagination. And so when you have a good imagination, you're really visualizing well. And if you can visualize well, you have a good imagination. And I want to pause and just mention that my own imagination is not very visual. Like, it's not like I see pictures so much as like the ideas of things. I create the concept of a big dark ball of my traumas, and I imagine the concept of a hammer smashing them, but it's not like seeing a movie of it.
Yeah.
So it's just the ideas. It's just creating these.
And different people will see it differently. So I'm glad that you're specifying that. You don't have to literally see this. You can just say it, but keep going.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Exactly. You know, everyone is so different, and some people can easily visually imagine. Some people kind of more like auditorily imagine it or imagine it through words, or some people will imagine it through feelings. Yeah, just today I was talking to somebody who said she experienced this kind of thing with flavor, and I thought, I have no idea what that would even entail, but I believe her. You know, I'm sure that is how it works for her. But if it's like a weird like spiritual taste, I don't know what that means, but we're all different. But imagination, one thing that has really, I quoted it earlier, there is no such thing as immaterial matter. And so I read that in a book that I treat as a scripture in my life, called The Doctrine and Covenants. And that phrase just really stuck with me, because it was referring to this idea that basically everything spiritual also has matter, right? It has these chemicals, it has this structure, it has molecules.
It's just a finer matter. It's just more delicate. It's just
exactly
refined.
Exactly. It's just purer. It's just more delicate. Exactly. And so our naked eyes might not be able to see it, but our spiritual eyes can see it. And so to me, imagination is just phenomenally powerful when you use it with intention. You know, just daydreaming or just, you know, reading a book and like imagining along with the book, like that's fine. Like, and that can still do stuff for you. You know, a lot of people, you know, daydream about something until it comes true or something. But when we decide to ask our own subconscious mind to generate the image of the energy involved in our problems or in our goals, you know, whatever our subconscious minds are generating for us is both symbolic, but also to me, it is kind of a literal representation of the energy of the issue, because electrons can exist in multiple places at the same time. So
are you going to talk quantum to us? I haven't found someone to talk quantum to us yet. Come on, quantum!
It's my jam.
Oh, good. Go into quantum, girl.
Yeah. So every atom, right? We have like our proton and our, you know, our nucleus, our neutron, and our electrons, and the electrons are on the outside. And electrons can exist in multiple places at once. And so to me, when we are imagining what is actually happening, right? When we're asking to imagine the energy of something that is real, if that's the energy of my relationship with my spouse, if it's the energy of my computer, it's the energy of my car, of my child, of my own self, of my liver, of my diabetes, or whatever it is, we ask to imagine the energy of this. And what is happening is the actual electrons involved in whatever this energy is, if it's the physical body, if it's the idea of a relationship, whatever it is, the actual electrons involved and the actual atoms involved in this structure, we are interacting with them as a group inside our own brain, and they take on a shape that we can understand. You know, as we set that intention, you know, let it form a shape that I can comprehend. It's the same electrons, right? We're interacting with the same atoms. And so to me, that's really the amazing thing about imagination. And then when you use your imagination to then change what you see, you're changing it on this end, but you're also changing it on that end. And so that to me is the power of visualization, is you are actually tweaking the atoms involved with your observation, which is, you know, scientifically called the observer effect, if you've heard of that.
Where that quantum theory.
Yeah, quantum theory, you know, if you have a random number generator and you decide you want more odds than evens, it will create more odds than evens because you picked that, even though it's random. And everything in the world, the atoms change based on who's observing it and their intentions. And that is something like you can go and find the studies on that is real. And a lot of people that deal with science, not quantum physics, have a really hard time reconciling it because it's so weird, but it is true on this micro level, but also on a macro level. I mean, everyone knows if somebody's watching you, you're going to act differently. For example, I usually don't wear a ton of makeup, but I did.
Me
I
either.
lipstick
Like,
for today
I'm not a makeup girl.
Yeah, exactly. The observer effect is really real, and we all engage in it on a macro scale and on this micro scale. So, so that is the power of imagination to me, is actually tweaking that on another level. If you've ever heard of a thing called like the law of witnesses, this idea that things actually, it's not considered valid unless there's a witness involved. That's a legal concept. In some religions, that's a religious concept, that there has to be a witness to changes. If you get married, you need a witness. If you change your name, you need a witness. Just recently, I signed a document. Oh, I got a new driver's license, and I needed a witness. And so the lady that gave me the form was the witness, obviously. But when you take a legal step forward in your life, you need witnesses. And when you go into your own mind and use your own imagination, you're harnessing the power of quantum physics, and you're harnessing your own powers of agency and your own powers of creativity, and you're acting as a witness for the changes that you want to see. And so we're creating this multifaceted shift where we're changing, we're changing the structures on a physical level, on an atomic level, on an emotional level, on a legal, on a lawful level, on the laws of the universe. Being the witness is one of the things that legitimizes change. Yeah. So to me, that is part of the power of imagination. Sorry, I feel like that was a super long answer for what.
No. Well, and multiple times I'm like, I've been wanting to bring up Genesis, and you talked about, anyway, it's God created things spiritually before he created them physically. And that's, that's that creative process at the order. It's, that he had to imagine it, had to be, imagine it, create it spiritually, then overlay it with the physical body.
Yes, it's totally true. I feel like imagination is the first step, and whether you're religious or not, hopefully we can all see that the architect has to think of the idea for the building before he draws it out, and then once he draws it out, then he has to manifest it into real life. Everything that we do starts up here where you can't see it. And so using your own power to decide on the story in advance, or to gather that energy visually or just with your imagination and decide how it's going to move out. What a powerful thing. Yeah. It's amazing.
It is. Are there other little aspects that you'd like to talk to us about the kind of trauma that this works for? Giving our listeners different ideas. Sometimes it can get their brain, that. Mm-hmm. So if you can give a little list.
Yes, I do. And I do have a book out about, it's called The Scribbling Solution, and it's all the sorts of things about scribbling and what you can use it for. But I've had people, so I used it to clear my blocks to house, and, we used it to clear out, the creepy guy that wouldn't leave this family alone. But some of my favorite stories were a lady complained in a group I'm in on Facebook. She said, I'm supposed to give a presentation, but I lost my voice and I can't talk. And she was like, does anyone have a remedy or something? And I sent her instructions on how to scribble. And I said, why don't you just try scribbling on your laryngitis for 5 or 10 minutes and see what happens? Well, what happened? It went away, and then she could talk. And she was able to do her presentation. I know, it was amazing. I basically couldn't believe it. I was like, are you for real? I thought this was just for emotional problems, but you cleared your laryngitis. But this has happened again and again. People have used it for knee pain, back pain, elbow, tennis elbow. People have used it for big traumas that they chop up and do a little bit at a time, and also just for little traumas, My kids really ticked me off today. Ugh, now I have to be nice to them? And no way. You take out your pencil, you're like, I can't stand my horrible kids. Ugh. And then you just scribble out the feelings of wanting to jump off a cliff, until it's all gone and you can, be a loving mommy again, all of that kind of thing.
I feel for the young moms that have these children that doing this during this COVID time, and it just must be so challenging for you guys. If you're restricting your children and keeping them home, and oh, may you be blessed.
Yeah, well, I love this as well because children can do it.
Yes, I've had kids do it, and it's really helpful. They get their crayons out and just like choose your color crayon that you feel like, and then go to town.
So my kids have to do this set of chores every day, and one of their chores is like it's like, go ask mom for a chore and do whatever she says. Like normally it's like clean up the shoes or like, clean up the basement. And a few days ago they were being so awful, but I thought, okay, we're just gonna scribble. We're gonna scribble. Your chore is to scribble for 5 minutes and do my scribbling exercise. And they were excited to do it. They each had to pick their crayon. We wrote on the top of the paper what they wanted to clear, And my oldest son, he was 8 at the time. He just turned 9, and he said, I'm feeling really afraid of aliens taking over the earth. And I said, okay, can't laugh at that fear, but I was like, okay. And so I wrote at the top of his paper, I'm afraid of aliens taking over the earth. And I had him rate his feelings, which is really helpful. I said, on a scale of 1
because you forget where you're at because it gets better, and you forget how bad you were.
Exactly. So I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how scared are you that aliens are going to take over the earth? And he said, a 4 out of 10, And so then I set the timer and I had them just scribble out their feelings. And so you write your intention at the top and then you scribble, and you can use a pencil or pen, you can use a crayon. Honestly, you don't even need paper. I have people do it on an iPhone app, a scribbling app, and
it's just your muscles need to have the movement so that can be slowed down.
Exactly. Sometimes I'll just dance. I'll be like, it's a scribble dance. Like I'm just getting out these terrible emotions through dance, But I had him scribble. I had him use his crayon. And so he just scribbled and scribbled and scribbled. As you do it, you'll find that your hand kind of does its own sort of motion. And that's how you know when you're done, is because it will naturally make the 0 shape. But usually scribbling is kind of random, and sometimes it's really not. Like I just recently had a lady who had, she was wanting to open her third eye, and she asked if I had any suggestions, and I said, well, why don't you just try scribbling on it? And she started scribbling all of this kind of shape naturally. Her hands just naturally made a whole page of this kind of shape. So you'll see as you try it that sometimes your hands will make crazy shapes, and it's pretty interesting. There is a Facebook group about it called 14 Days of Scribbling. I can't remember it. Well, anyway, we can send it out, but
yeah, no, that's great. What I'd like to do is kind of backwards. I would like you to talk about your free gift, and then however you happen to want to talk about deep past resolution, we will go into that topic, even though we supposedly only have 2 minutes.
Oh no, okay.
But we're not worried about time. People can just disconnect if they want to, and you and I can just have a lovely chat together.
Yeah,
and it's so funny. I have to mention, when you mentioned doing anything you want, I thought of having my Kundalini raised, because you and I worked on that, and you're like, it's there, girl, and you just need to tweak it a little bit, and I haven't done the work to help that completely flow up from my root to my crown, and I could scribble on that. Totally forgot. Scribble on getting that raised.
Yeah, you could do that. One that comes into my mind right this minute is acne, or like if you have a liver problem or blood sugar problem, like just try it, just see what happens. So my free gift is a copy of my book, Deep Past Resolution. And I thought it would be a good gift because it talks about scribbling in it, but not just scribbling for anything, although also scribbling for anything, but it puts it into a larger context of using this very simple technique to heal from very complex, unremembered issues, which I think is really great because, so in my belief system, I do believe that our consciousnesses are eternal, that you had a consciousness before you were born. And if we had consciousness before before we were born, and we had agency before we were born, we were able to make choices and have feelings and have interactions, then we also had trauma. And this explains why people come how they come. And if you are a parent, especially more than one child, hopefully you have noticed that your children were kind of who they are, like from the start, you know. And I have 4 kids, and they are all really different, and they just always were, you know. They came out how they came out. I have this very sweet and docile child, and he still is, and he always was. And I have this very crazy, like, volcano child, and she was a volcano from literally her 15-minute labor and birth on my living room floor by surprise. And I have another son that's just so exuberant. He's just a joyful child in every moment. And they all came that way. From the moment they were born, they were that way. But why? And so to me, this is a framework that I use to understand why we are the way that we are. And then if there's things in our lives that we don't like, then we can use that paradigm to shift out of that. Because a lot of times I think we fall into these patterns where when we say, I don't even know where this came from. Like, there's nothing in, you know, my life or my child's life or whoever's life to explain why I feel this way. You know, there's nothing in my life to explain why I'm terrified of starving, or why, you know, one thing, like, I used to be very scared of like falling through the slats on unfinished houses. Like, if I saw unfinished houses, I would like get a heart attack. It was so terrifying to me for like no good reason, you know. And so sometimes we have these like very weird niche issues, and we're like, I don't even know why I'm terrified of escalators or jellyfish or whatever. And so this is a framework that you can use to understand it. And that is important to mention because you know, I just feel like it's very important to acknowledge everybody's personal, like, spiritual and religious beliefs. And I don't mean to, I mean, I feel like this system really honors everybody's beliefs and just gives everybody tools to use to shift out of patterns. And that's all that I'm interested in, is shifting out of a pattern that we don't understand and using scribbling to do it, which I think is just a fabulous tool.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And those that I have friends that aren't religious and many that are. And those that are, it's easy to think of, well, if you think of like the child prodigies, the musicians that just come and can play amazing piano, well, they probably had eons of a desire with music that they had been developing that talent. And it just makes sense that you can understand how it can flow into this life. And if we had the agency to choose our time to spend in the way that interests us back then, and then in the Bible it talks about this war in heaven, wouldn't we have a great sadness of that? And that, you know, and how it talks about some of the people didn't continue on, and so there could be deep trauma of sadness, of loss from that for those that do believe in that system. And to choose to scribble about those things that they don't quite remember, it can be a very healing experience. And yeah, it's food for thought, you know, that I think a lot of people might not think that there might have been trauma in heaven. It's like, how could there be anything? Like, no, I think there was some unhappy, sad times there, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we have different feelings as we came into this body of, you know, some of us were all excited, and other of us were like, I'm excited, and then like, wait, what did I choose? And then we carry that energy into our physical form, and
absolutely
work through that. So.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, the thing that I love about scribbling, when you try it, you will see for yourself that sometimes you can feel radically different immediately. And immediately, as soon as your hand naturally makes that shape of emptiness, you just feel so different. And when you scribble on what I call deep past stuff, like in this book, you can feel so different. Like, And that's really the big thing for me is, does it make you feel different? Does it make you feel better? And sometimes the answer is like a serious and resounding, thorough yes.
Yeah, and if it has good fruits, then give it a try.
Yeah. Invest 5 minutes.
Take
Something out.
Oh, well, it does seem like an effective technique that helps with lots of things. And is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we say goodbye for today?
Nothing that I can think of, but I am just so glad to share with everybody today. And I hope you do check out that free gift, Deep Past Resolution. It is a full-length book. It is kind of on the longer end, I think. But to me, it's a page turner. So I hope you love it as much as I loved writing it.
Oh, thank you so much, Allie, for gifting them that book. I'm just so excited to give people simple tools, even if they sound weird. Just try them. Just give it a try.
Yeah, exactly. What do you have to lose?
Exactly.
All your traumas. That's what you have to lose.
That's what you have to lose. All right. Well, I would like to thank everyone for spending their time with us today. And I hope that you have a day filled with love and peace and laughter. Take care. Bye.